The train rattled through the endless plains of Texas, its iron wheels grinding against the rails with a mournful rhythm. Inside one of the windowless cars sat dozens of German soldiers, once proud men of the Wehrmacht, now silent, defeated, and coated in the dust of a lost war. Friedrich Keller sat among them, his uniform wrinkled and his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. He could still smell the smoke of the battlefield in Normandy, where everything he believed in had burned away. No one spoke. The air inside was heavy with a strange mixture of fear and relief, fear of what awaited them in this foreign land, and relief that at least for now the shooting had stopped. When the train finally screeched to a halt, sunlight poured in as the doors clanged open. Outside, a line of American soldiers stood waiting, rifles slung lazily over their shoulders. They did not look cruel, just cautious, almost bored. Friedrich blinked against the light. It was blinding after days in the dark. "Move out, line up," one of the Americans shouted. The prisoners shuffled out into the dry Texas heat. The sky was too wide, too blue, and the air smelled of grass and dust, not of war, not of home, but something unfamiliar. In the distance stood rows of wooden barracks surrounded by barbed wire. A sign read, "Camp Hearn, U.S. Army, POW Camp." Friedrich's heart sank. He had heard rumors about American camps that they treated prisoners well, sometimes even too well. But standing there, stripped of his weapon, his rank, and his purpose, he felt nothing but emptiness. They were given numbers, not names. His was 2147. A tag with that number was sewn onto his uniform. That night, lying on a cot in a shared barrack, he listened to the quiet hum of insects outside and the distant laughter of American guards. It was a strange sound, laughter. He hadn't heard it in months. The next morning, the prisoners were herded to the mess hall. The smell of food filled the air, warm bread, coffee, and something sweet and nutty. Friedrich hadn't smelled anything like it before. When he reached the counter, a young American cook handed him a metal tray with scrambled eggs, toast, and a spoonful of brown paste. He stared at it. "What is this?" he asked in halting English. The cook grinned. "Peanut butter," he said. "You spread it on the toast, like jam." Friedrich frowned, but obeyed. The paste was thick, salty, and a little sweet, unlike anything he'd ever tasted. Around him, other German soldiers exchanged puzzled looks. Some laughed quietly, others muttered that it must be dog food. But as he chewed, Friedrich realized it was good, strangely comforting. For a brief moment he felt human again. That night, he sat outside the barrack watching the sunset turn the Texas sky into rivers of orange and gold. It was peaceful, almost beautiful. He thought about home, about his mother's kitchen in Bremen, about the quiet streets he used to walk before the war. He wondered if his family even knew he was alive. A fellow prisoner, Otto, sat beside him. "Do you think they'll ever send us home?" Otto asked softly. Friedrich hesitated. "Maybe, when the war is over." But what if it never ends? Friedrich didn't answer. The world felt too broken for peace. And yet, as he looked up at the stars, the same stars that hung over Germany, he felt a strange calm. Here, in the heart of his enemy's country, there was no bombing, no fear, no hatred, only the hum of crickets and the faint echo of music from the guardhouse. It was the first quiet night he'd known in years. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Life in Camp Hearn fell into a quiet rhythm, the kind of order that only war prisoners could understand. Every morning, a whistle signaled roll call. Every evening, the same whistle announced lights out. Between those hours, Friedrich worked in the camp garden, tending to rows of tomatoes and beans under the blazing Texas sun. The Americans allowed them to work not as slaves, but as laborers. For every day's work, they earned small credits that could be exchanged for cigarettes, postcards, or even chocolate at the camp canteen. It was almost civilized, almost human. Sometimes Friedrich forgot he was a prisoner. He began to learn English from one of the guards, a young man named Tom, who was barely older than himself. Tom had grown up on a farm in Iowa and spoke with a warm drawl that made his words sound slower, calmer. He didn't talk about the war much. Instead, he asked Friedrich about Germany, the rivers, the cities, the food. One day, as they watered the garden together, Tom said, "You know, I don't hate you guys. You just ended up on the wrong side of things." Friedrich didn't know how to respond. The words hit him harder than any insult could. The wrong side of things. That night, Friedrich couldn't sleep. He stared at the wooden ceiling above his bunk, replaying those words in his mind. What was the right side? He had believed once that Germany was fighting for its future, for survival. But after years of blood, ashes, and orders that no man should follow, all he saw was destruction, his homeland torn apart, his friends buried in foreign soil. The next morning, while working near the camp fence, he saw a group of American children standing outside waving. They were curious, laughing, holding small flags. One little girl, no older than 7, pointed at him and giggled. Friedrich smiled back without thinking. It was such a simple gesture, but it broke something inside him. He realized how long it had been since anyone had smiled at him without fear or hate. After that, he began writing in a small notebook the camp library had given him. In shaky English and neat German, he wrote about everything: the sky, the smell of peanut butter, the sound of crickets, and the feeling of grass under his hands. It was his way of remembering that life could still exist beyond uniforms and orders. One afternoon, a storm rolled across the plains. The wind howled, rain hammered the barracks, and thunder cracked like artillery fire. For a moment, the camp was chaos shouts in English and German mixed with the roar of nature. Friedrich crouched by the window, trembling, his mind thrown back to France, to the sound of shells and screams. He couldn't breathe. Then, someone touched his shoulder. It was Tom. Soaked from the rain, his voice steady. "Hey, it's just thunder. You're safe now." Safe. The word felt strange, almost impossible. The storm passed, leaving the camp washed clean, the air cool and sweet. Friedrich stepped outside, letting the rain drip from his hair. For the first time, he realized that this land, his enemy's land, had begun to feel less like a prison and more like a place where he could breathe again. In the evenings, the prisoners gathered to sing old German songs. The guards listened quietly, some even smiling. There was one song Friedrich always led, Lily Marleen. Its melody floated over the barbed wire, soft and lonely, crossing the invisible line between captive and captor. One night, after the song faded, Tom approached him again. "Beautiful song," he said. "What's it about?" Friedrich smiled sadly. "About love and waiting." Tom nodded, looking toward the stars. "Seems like we're all waiting for something these days." Friedrich looked at him, really looked. The young American's face, tired but kind, carried the same exhaustion he saw in his own reflection. It didn't matter which flag they fought under. They were just two men who had seen too much and wanted to go home. That night, Friedrich wrote in his notebook, "War makes us forget that our enemies are human. Peace is remembering." And for the first time since the war began, he meant it. By the spring of 1945, rumors began to drift through the camp like whispers carried on the wind. Germany was collapsing. The war was ending. At first, no one believed it. They had lived too long in uncertainty to trust hope. But then the American newspapers began printing photographs of Berlin in ruins, Hitler's generals surrendering, Allied soldiers marching through cities they once only knew by maps. The world they had left behind was gone. Friedrich stood at the fence one afternoon, staring into the open horizon. The Texas fields stretched endlessly before him, green and golden under the sun. It was strange. He thought this land that had held him captive now looked freer than anything he had ever known. The guards treated them differently, too less watchful, almost gentle. Tom brought them extra rations, cigarettes, and even a small radio. Through its crackling speakers, the prisoners heard the voice of an American announcer. Germany has surrendered. The war in Europe is over. The camp fell silent. Some cheered, others wept. Friedrich felt nothing at first, just a vast, aching emptiness. He sat down on the dirt and stared at his hands. The same hands that had once held a rifle, that had dug trenches, that had buried friends. Now they were trembling. Tom came over quietly. "You'll be going home soon," he said. Friedrich looked up. Home. He repeated the word like it was something fragile, something distant. If there's anything left. Tom didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew that some homes no longer existed, only memories did. Weeks passed, and the camp began to change. The fences were still there, but the guards stopped locking the gates during the day. Prisoners were allowed to walk to nearby farms, to help harvest crops or repair fences. Some even went fishing with local farmers. The war had ended, but life quietly, stubbornly went on. One morning, Friedrich joined Tom on a trip to a nearby town. For the first time, he saw ordinary American life up close: children playing in dusty streets, women hanging laundry, men fixing cars and laughing loudly. Nobody looked at him with hate. Nobody called him enemy. They stopped at a small diner. Tom ordered 2 sandwiches and 2 glasses of iced tea. When the waitress set the plates down, Friedrich hesitated. There, between the slices of bread, was a thick layer of peanut butter. Tom noticed his look and smiled. "You used to hate it." Friedrich shook his head slowly. "I didn't hate it. I just didn't understand it." He took a bite. It tasted exactly like the first time, salty, sweet, strange, and warm. But now it carried something more. It tasted like forgiveness. That night, back in camp, Friedrich wrote his final words in the notebook that had followed him through months of captivity. "In war, we are taught to fear the faces we do not know, but in peace, we learn that kindness can come from the hands of our enemies." The next morning, the first group of prisoners was scheduled for repatriation. Trucks lined up outside the camp, engines rumbling softly. Friedrich packed his few belongings: a comb, his worn-out boots, the notebook, and a small jar of peanut butter Tom had quietly slipped into his bag. As he climbed onto the truck, Tom walked beside him. "Take care, Friedrich," he said. "Maybe one day you'll come back and see us again." And Friedrich smiled faintly. "Maybe, and maybe when you do, I'll make you try sauerkraut." Tom laughed. "Deal." The truck started to move. Friedrich looked back one last time. The camp that had once felt like a cage now looked almost peaceful under the morning sun. The barbed wire glimmered softly, no longer threatening, just part of the landscape. As the miles rolled away, Friedrich opened his notebook again and wrote a final line beneath his last entry. "Freedom isn't the absence of walls. It's the ability to see beyond them." He closed the notebook and watched the horizon stretch before him, wide, open, endless. Somewhere beyond it lay Germany, whatever remained of it. Somewhere beyond it lay the rest of his life. And for the first time in years, Friedrich Keller smiled not as a soldier, not as a prisoner, but as a man who had finally remembered what it meant to be human.